guest is Anita Agers Brooks.
Each one of us were created on purpose, with purpose, to fulfill a purpose. And maybe your purpose comes through your pain.
Pass it on, share the gospel clear and strong. Stand for, claim your heritage of truth.
Welcome to Heritage of Truth. Today my guest is Anita Agers Brooks. Welcome, Anita.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
Thank you for coming and talking to us. You've got a new book that is, I think, a really good resource. It's called Getting Through What You Can't Get Over. Stories, tips, and inspiration to help you move past your pain into lasting freedom. Now, we have done a lot of shows about people who have gotten through some sort of a problem, some sort of a tragedy or whatever, and they've been wonderful books and wonderful shows. But there's something different about your book, and that was why I wanted to interview you. Why don't you explain the difference that I mentioned to you?
Well, the difference for me is, one, there are so many people when they're going through a difficulty, a dark valley, or they feel like they're in that deep pit of depression or anxiety, and they want to scale those walls and they just slip back down. And other people will come alongside them. They mean well, but they try to fix or they try to cheer them up. And sadly, for that wounded or hurting person who's went through a traumatic event, that actually almost exacerbates the hurt for them. Proverbs 25:20 says that singing songs to a heavy heart is like taking a cloak from a man on a cold day or pouring vinegar in an open wound. And so this book is one part written to those who are going through something they're never going to get over, but equally for those who want to come alongside them, but they don't want to do something that might make things worse. So at the end of each chapter, I've written what are called Insider Insights, and they're broken down actually into 4 parts. So there are bullet points, and there are practical help tips, there's emotional healing tips, spiritual comfort tips, and then there is a guided prayer at the end of each. And every chapter tells a true story of someone who has went through something that they absolutely will never get over. One woman lost her daughter in the Moore, Oklahoma tornado of 2013. One woman was abused, sexually abused as a child. And there were things in her adult life that she kept seeming to be in a cycle, a rut. And she couldn't figure out why she couldn't get past these things, why she wasn't treating herself better. But it was because she never went back and dealt with that root cause, the root pain in her life. So I deal with a lot of common traumas in the everyday person and PTSD in the everyday person.
Now, for people who don't understand PTSD, can you explain a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Post-traumatic stress disorder is actually a very normal reaction to abnormal stress. So it's something that either was life-threatening or maybe we just perceived it to be life-threatening to us. You know, a child, when they're being abused, even verbally abused, that can feel threatening to their very being. Well, what can happen is if we don't face that pain and we don't deal with that, when we grow into adulthood, we keep burying those things and using defense mechanisms that frankly just aren't working. And so what I've tried to do through research and interviews and some of my own life experiences is share those things that really have helped people find true healing from lasting pain. So,
Of all the stories in here, is there one that you would like to share?
Oh, absolutely. The very first chapter, in the opening chapter, is more of a general statement to depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress. But it is the true story of my interaction, I call it divine intervention, where God introduced me to a Holocaust survivor.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, I went to a conference. Most miraculous thing, there were over 300 people there that day, and out of those 300 people, this woman picked me out. And she said to me that God had spoken and we needed to meet. And so the next day I drove back and we sat down over breakfast, which by the way lasted all day. I took her to the airport that afternoon. But she shared things from her own life and her own history in the Holocaust that were horrific. And yet here was this woman across the table from me, and she was laughing and she was smiling, and I could just see the joy oozing out of her. And she asked me, she said, "What is this pain that is etched in your eyes?" That gets your attention.
Yes.
And so I, spilled out my story to her, and she leaned across and she put her hand on mine. She did not try to fix me. She didn't try to cheer me up. I could just feel the true empathy from her. And she asked me if I was familiar with the 23rd Psalm. And I said, "Yes, I am." And she said, "Tell me, do you not feel as if you are walking through the valley of the shadow of death right now?" And I just started weeping because that was exactly how I felt. And she said, "I want you to take note. God does not say slow down. He does not say stop. He does not say pitch a tent. He does not say build a house. He tells us to walk. And when you believe that you do not have the strength to take one more step, you think of me and you walk anyway." And she said, "Over time, you will put enough steps in front of the other until one day you will look up and suddenly realize that you have stepped out of the darkness and into the light." Transformed my life.
I'll bet.
Yeah, and there were many days after where, I did feel very dark and I felt like I couldn't go on. And I would remember her words and I would step anyway. And I absolutely remember the day that I caught myself genuinely laughing again. It wasn't forced and it wasn't fake. It was the real thing. And that epiphany hit me. It was like, oh my goodness, I've stepped back into the light, back into the land of the living.
Wow, she sounds like such a wise woman.
Oh, she's incredible.
Have you kept in touch with her?
Edie Agers is her name. She is in Southern California. Edie was 73 years old when I met her, and that's been, oh my goodness, over 15 years ago.
Wow.
She's no longer, speaking publicly, but she's still making a difference. Mm-hmm. And that was something else that I learned from Edie, and frankly, that's why I wrote Getting Through What You Can't Get Over, because Edie taught me that no matter what you go through, you may not get over it, but it can be used for good. It can make a difference. And each one of us were created on purpose, with purpose, to fulfill a purpose. And maybe your purpose comes through your pain.
That's true. That's true. So what are some of the other things that you cover in here?
I cover, as I said, sexual abuse.
Mm-hmm.
I also cover financial issues, debt, foreclosure, repossession, the fear of losing a job. We don't always identify that those things are traumatizing, but frankly, they are.
Oh, yes.
If you live in a grip of fear, you're not really living. Mm-hmm. So I deal with those. Family feuds, that's something too that so many times when we have those relationships that are broken between people, and sometimes when you have done everything within your power, you'll still beat yourself up for mm-hmm. that. So I address some of those things. Affairs, in marriage, that's a very difficult thing. And so I have walked that journey myself, and I know what that feels like to be betrayed and feel broken, and you just want to feel wanted again. Mm-hmm. And then to learn that God does want you, and that even though spouses make mistakes, we don't have to hold them up to unreasonable expectations. We can forgive when we realize that Christ is our perfect mate. Mm-hmm. So that was another one that was just incredible. And then Scars of Love is the true story of my event after donating a kidney to my sister in 1997. And I had a near-death experience as a result of that. After the surgery went great, I'm a living donor advocate. I want to be clear on that, but I had a severe allergic reaction to the pain medications afterwards.
Oh, okay.
And so that was another life-changing event in my life. There's a story of a woman who was crushed in a workplace accident and thoughts of suicide. So many people secretly in that private place in their soul wonder, is life worth living? Is God mad at me? Does God exist? And so that chapter really speaks to that. And then the final chapter is really about becoming free of those things, that place where You no longer are held in bondage by your pain. And so it's a 12-step, what I call valley map, that helps you get through that dark valley and helps guide you through to reach that point where you step into the light.
So taking one step at a time, just like your friend said.
Absolutely. And one thing I would say to the hurting person, so oftentimes we're told take it one day at a time. Well, frankly, when you're going through a traumatic event, sometimes one day feels overwhelming.
Oh, yeah.
It's just too
one
much.
breath at a time.
Yes, and that's what I say, one moment at a time. If you can find that thing to get you through the next moment.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I've written the book in a way, there are a lot of, as I said, true stories in there that are very compelling, and there are lessons embedded in those. But I wanted those bullet point things at the end of each chapter, so if that person who is struggling needs something to just grip in the moment to get through the next moment, they can quickly pick it up and flip to those.
Okay. Well, it sounds like this is really going to be a helpful resource for people. Where can people find you online?
They can find me at anitabrooks.com, so that's ANITABROOKS.com.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for being our guest.
Thank you. It is my pleasure. I really appreciate it.
Share the gospel.